Welcome to Dropping In, Legends in Risk Management, the YouTube channel where we invite people of notable achievement in the field of risk management and have conversations with them about what they have learned over the years about how to be successful in risk management. And whom better to have on the show than Petter Kapstad, the man behind one of the world's finest enterprise risk management programs, the one of Equinor, the Norwegian energy giant. Petter is one of my true heroes. He's an expert in the trading aspects of risk, the governance of it, the culture, you name it. He has patiently and consistently built up Equinor's risk management program over many years to what it is today, and I'm sure learned a few things along the way. So hi Petter, how are things in Norway?
Hi, everything is fine. Still a little bit certainly under the pressure of the corona, but I mean the vaccine program is moving forward. So obviously we are seeing the light in the tunnel, and hopefully we can manage to come through the worst of it during the summer or something like that, Håkan. So looking forward to that.
That would be wonderful to be able to travel back to Norway again. That's one of my favorite countries in the world. So,
You're very
much looking forward. So here's our first question for you, Petter, related to risk management, that is. And I know that you are of the opinion that the risk management function should be associated with a high level of integrity and needs to earn the trust and respect of the other parts of the organization. Why is integrity so important to a risk manager?
Well, it's twofold. First of all, I think that Håkan, that everything we can achieve, everything we can actually come up with of good result is closely linked to risk. We can't actually do anything. We can't earn anything. We can't achieve anything if we are not willing to take one or more forms of risk. So it's a very, very close link between what our performance and the risk we do have. And that's why it's also important to understand the balance between risk and reward and how we have achieved it. And that makes the management certainly more sure about how they have done, what they will do in the future, and how it's created and what we have really done to create it. But I've learned over many years that sometimes it's people that not so interested in get the full picture of what's behind their performance and what's the risk been taken to achieve this. And so risk integrity is in two levels. First of all, as a risk manager, you have to have a personal integrity, making sure that you are always willing to be honest and open with what you know and share it with the people who you should share it with, and not holding anything back because someone maybe you don't want to hear it. The other one is actually the level that's even more important, and that's the organizational, where we have to make sure that the governance structure in the company allows the risk management to come forward with what they know and what they've said. And again, I don't try to say that risk management should decide or do anything like that. That's definitely the board, the executive management's role. But risk management should inform, and they should inform with integrity and openness. And they should also be actually make sure that, as I said, the governance structure is so that they can do that, even if there are discrepancies between them and the executive management or a project or whatever. So that is, for me, very important, because even with a good risk management, you can fail if that information is not coming through to the person, to the government, to the executive management or to the board that should know about it. So a good risk management is not a guarantee for anything if they not are free to speak, and if the integrity in the organization or the personal integrity is not there. A long answer on a short question.
Thank you, Petter. Very interesting. Would you say that there are generally too many people eager to agree? Yes, people and yes, men, yes, women in organizations, and that the risk manager should not be one of those people then?
Definitely. And I think that again is also very much founded on the culture, because this is not something that is, yeah, it changes from organization to organization, from period to period. And I've seen in so many companies where had an excellent integrity and an excellent culture change to something less and something a little bit more water out. And so I think that first of all, you can't take anything of this for granted. It's something that you always have to keep an eye on and to make sure that you keep alive and that you do everything you can to keep it up. And as you said, a yes culture is really dangerous for a company, because this actually watering out the effect of risk management and their knowledge and their experience. So yes, but again, it changes. You can come also from a yes culture over to a very good culture, because the management, the board, the culture in these two very important levels in organization changes, and you will see the change in culture change the behavior. So again, what I'm trying to say, this goes up and down, and it's not you can take for granted. You have to work hard to keep it up and to keep it on the best level possible.
I agree, Petter. But what then if you are a young risk manager with career ambitions and the culture is one of fear, where you have a visionary top management who just want to move forward with things? And do you think it can put such a risk manager in a tough spot and possibly, be a bad career move if you insist on speaking your mind with integrity?
Yeah, you can do it, but one thing that's expected also from the risk management is that you are value creating and proactive. And I think that the younger you are, the less experience you have, and it's also maybe a little bit more difficult to be very value creating for the time being, because this is something you have to earn. You don't get it easily in an organization. You have to have a kind of both an internal but also an external experience and knowledge, and known to be proactive. There are things that more senior people looking after, and if you don't have it, it's easy that they don't respect you that much, even if you are very competent and very educated on this. But obviously there is a link between experience and how mature you can actually be in a difficult situation. So yes, I think that a good thing to do when you have very new people coming into the organization, upcoming very bright people, is that you pair them with the experience. You should always make sure that you have an overlap between experienced people and new people coming up. And if you can do that, then you will have one experienced, respected person coming along with a new one. And on that way, you also make sure that the young one starts to understand this balance, starts to understand how important it is to really have the experience and also to behave like a value creating person that are trying to solve problem, not to just see the problem, but to solve them and to do it in a way that make the best out of it for the corporate.
So true. And this brings us in a way to our second theme here, which is another thing you look for in a risk manager, which is that he or she has a deep understanding of the firm's business model. Why do you think, Petter, that such an understanding of the value chain is so important to be a good risk manager?
I've seen way too many examples where people doesn't understand what they are really doing in their own corporate. And obviously, I mean, I think everyone do see that it must be difficult to sort out and to find the fine-tuning balance between risk and reward if you're not actually knowing where the money, where the costs are coming from. If you don't have an intimate picture of that, I think it's very, very difficult to actually manage these fine-tuned balance between risk and reward. And it might be easier in a very commercial company where things is a little bit clearer, where the value drivers are more visual and obvious for people. But you have also you have other types of organization where this could be a little bit more blurry, and where it actually starts to actually sort out what is the value creation we should deliver, what is the value of having us here. And before you have actually sorted out that and defined that, it's hard to start with the risk management, because then you can say something about what's the upside with what we're doing, what's the downside, how do we manage the balance between risk and reward. So, and I've seen it very, very typically in our own oil company, how important it is to have people in the risk position that truly knows the business and what's going on, and where is the really risk that matters, where are the really most important value drivers. And then you can really start to deep dive into this to understand what kind of risk are associated with these value drivers on the upside as well as the downside. Where are our possibilities, and where are our threats or downsides?
Okay, Petter, a very interesting answer again. But do you think that there can also be too much of a good thing? Let's say you recruit as a risk manager somebody experienced from the company, who knows the value chain inside out, but because they're very, experienced in the company, there is too little in the way of new perspectives. So that the risk manager is too close to how everyone else is already thinking in the organization. So again, I suspect there must be some kind of balance. Am I right? That
you're very right, and you have to have. I think that a risk manager never must stop to be very open to new things, to new possibilities, to a new future. I think, as you are alluding to, Håkan, I think that a guy that, think that what we are doing now, that's the best, and that's the best for all time further. I think that's devastating for a risk manager, because if it's anyone that needs to be really, as I said, open to changes, open to new possibilities, open to a new world, to new possibilities during geopolitical changes, to financial changes. I think that we have seen that already from our own company, where we are shifting from being an integrated or a fully integrated oil company to be more an energy company, and where we have to do maybe a tough and a little bit painful change, and where our risk manager has to adapt to that and to start to learn, understand the new era of our company, and to really be up to speed when it comes to renewables, when it comes to being an energy company, to carbon capture and things that's been not a part of our core business so far, but will be it now in the near future.
But okay, that's how would you actually do that in practice? Let's say you recruit a new individual as risk manager, and that person is an expert in risk methodology, knows everything about the methods and techniques, etc. But they don't have that understanding of the business that you're looking for. What would you do, Petter, to help that person achieve an acceptable or even excellent understanding of the value chain?
I guess there is not one answer to this, but what we have done, and that works pretty good, is that we have set up very good trainee programs for new people, making sure that if they are coming with a good risk background and are very professional when it comes to risk and risk understanding, well, then we spend more time out in the business. So, for example, now we have very clever people coming with an excellent background, working with our strategy people in the renewables, working with our project managers in renewables, to really get the deep understanding and to be at their help and assistance in their difficult work to find the right project, to find the right angle to attack the project, and so on. So, and then develop a deep knowledge over these type of business. And then starting with that, you could also have started with oil and gas, but we have started very often with giving them an excellent possibility to know what will be more of in our future, and then move them through our trainee programs over to the gas and oil program to actually learn what this is about. So we have always had very good program to actually build up a quite good understanding and trainee program. So I think that new people coming in is actually more blessed than we were in the good old times, where you very often started in one business unit and you stayed there, and it was very limited what you or how broad experience and how broad understanding you get of the rest of the business. So I think we have improved as a company, where we show that we are willing to invest so much that we let people over a year or two being around in the company on very important spots to learn if they really should be and should be able to do the duty as a good risk manager.
That sounds like a great way to do it, Petter. And thank you. We're moving on to the next theme, which is something you have already mentioned, actually. One of the key principles on which you have built Equinor's risk management program is that creating value is impossible without taking risk, and that the point is to strike a balance between risk and return. Do you think that risk managers today are excessively focused on one part of that equation, which is eliminating downside risk?
Yeah, certainly there are, you find both types, but I think still we are dragging a little bit of what I call the old-fashioned of risk management, which is a more retroactive, more reporting culture, where you are telling your manager that you have lost or gained a sum, that you are within your mandate, and so on, but without saying anything about the possibilities coming forward, if there are anything that could be or create an even better balance between risk and reward, to say anything about how you have utilized the risk capital. So I still feel there is a gap, definitely a gap we have to fill, and we have to educate people to be ready to be a part of, to actually be more proactive, and to be a wanted participant around the decision table, because you are actually creating values, either through other way of seeing things, because you see the upsides that no one else may see, because you see structure financially, commodity wise, that other ones can't see because they are not professional risk managers, I think. And you do see also threats and upsides. And I learned from my time in Goldman that this was very, very important to be actually, or to having these or this way of looking at risk management, not coming just with the problems, just saying, no, this is dangerous, this is way too much risk. I saw that the people who are really needed and wanted around the decision table, those were the risk manager that also had the ability to actually see the possibilities to be value creating. They were really someone everyone asked for. And without being asked for, I think you have to strive very much more to be a part of the decision table. So I think it's so important that we can show the executive management, the board, that we are not just an arm of the audit that just saying no or saying this is dangerous and pointing out all the downsides, but actually can help the management to create values.
That is a very interesting perspective, Petter. And but do you think that the problem could sometimes be the incentives of risk managers? Because, as people often say, if you want to understand a certain behavior, just look at their incentives. So could it be the case that most risk managers have incentives to focus on the downside? That is, they are perhaps afraid to get blamed for bad things that could happen, so that they prefer more focus on risk management for that reason.
Yeah, a very good point, Håkan. And yes, certainly it certainly has something to do with how the risk manager are incentivized. And I'm afraid I have to admit that I also seen boards that incentivize the manager to just look for the downside, and not just for the downside, but for the downside that could harm the board, and where the risk manager is actually watching their backs and only thinking about this and only concentrating about this. And certainly that is important, that we don't do anything wrong legally or professionally when it comes to the being accounting wise, reporting wise, and so on. But that is a way too narrow one. But I think that if we want to do something with that, we also need to have managers and boards that do see that risk management and understand that risk management is much more than that. It's good to have some understanding of this, and that certainly that you have a part of the risk that also have keep an eye with these things. But that alone, that is not the full-blown risk management. So I think a new risk manager today are or will be better incentivized than just for a couple of years ago, where I think very much was about the downside. What I heard from bigger industry companies and banks today is that they also play a more active role. But there is a way to go, and you are pointing at the very, very important issue, Håkan. So I think it's something that everyone has to be aware of. The board has to be aware of it, and to be very clear that we are not looking for a risk manager that just help us to keep our back clean. It is also more than that. It's as I said, it's to be value creating, looking forward. We are also looking for, but this incentivizing has to come. It's very important that it comes from both the board and the executive management, because it could be really hard for a new risk manager to actually change it from a retroactive and reporting wise to a proactive one without their support and understanding.
Thank you, Petter. Very, very good to hear that some progress is being made, at least on this front. But another thing you could perhaps bring up in this context is that focusing on just the risk makes everything easier. We can define and quantify risk pretty well, but what is upside really? How should we think about that? It seems like we spend much less time conceptualizing and making the upside visible in a way that you can connect to risk management. Do you see any possibilities to improve here in the way we think about upside potential?
Definitely. And I think we also have to be aware of that. We're talking about kind of two levels of upside. You have the intrinsic level, which is the near future. It's today, what you can do and what you can achieve today, where the risk manager is sitting along in small teams with a trader, where they are looking at possibilities in the market. And I think we have seen at least a change of risk manager where using arms or respectively, I mean, as a value creation proactive risk manager together with our trading teams on the intrinsic, on the tactical side. But even more important is to educate also risk managers that are able to look at the more strategic risk. Because as you probably know and seen, it was a study done from Harvard University in 2015, where they were very good, pointing out that actually most of the company was spending their risk management resources on things that doesn't actually was the most lucrative things and the most important things, while the upsides as well as the downside were mostly coming from the biggest one at least was coming from the strategic side. And when they were asked why is it like that, the simple answer was that, well, we don't know how to actually attack that part of risk management. How should we handle it? What kind of knowledge? Because when you're working with the intrinsic value, when you're working with the tactical things, you have time series, you have prices, you have a lot of information about things, And it's so much easier to come up with a formula. It's so much easier to calculate something. When you're working with a strategic, you don't have nothing. You don't know anything about the market that maybe is not there yet. And you don't know anything about what prices could be or geopolitical problems or challenges. You don't know anything. And you have to actually be quite alone. You have to stick your neck out and to do something. And I think that's definitely something we should need to be more aware of and starts to actually bring up. And I've seen from our own company how much what we call the radar, which is our it's actually a radar where we are actually trying to identify strategic issues coming up, both on the upside as well as the downside in the future. And I have seen how much the board has loved that and taking that and using that for what it's worth. And I think that is something that we should certainly be much better on, and to be ready to do the impossible when it comes to calculating things. And we have done a lot of these things. And one thing I know for sure is that the figures we are coming up with, that's not correct. That I'm definitely sure about. But the process we had to come up with it and all the discussion we had around it with our best people, with our best experts, both internally and externally, that has at least given us a better platform for meaning something, for being ready to do something and to learn us new things that we never ever would have discussed if we haven't been willing to stick our neck out and to say something quantifiable about what this is about, what is the possibilities, what is the downside, and not just using colors or something else, but actually try to calculate what is the potential upside in dollars, what is the potential downside here, what is the most important value drivers we know about and can think about today, what could really happen with this, what is the risk that could change these things. All the discussion and the process around this is very important. So I think that when it comes to this, it's two levels, as I say, and I think that we have gained quite a bit on the tactical or the intrinsic side, but still has a long way to go on the more strategic one.
Interesting. Yes, the process of risk management, there's lots of value already there in getting people together and talking, definitely. And Petter, we have another theme for you here. One of the things you believe have to be in place to achieve good risk governance is that the board of directors take an interest in risk management, which traditionally they have not had.
Yeah.
What is it you think that the board should be doing, and how can you get on the journey towards a risk-conscious board that contributes meaningfully to the risk management process?
That is really a difficult question, because again, there are so many levels of boards when it comes to experience and what they have been doing before. So, I mean, but I think in general, I think it's important, first of all, that the board playing a more actively role and take the time to actually do understand the risk, the rough risk picture of a company. And to do that, I think, first of all, it's different ways to have communication with the board. But I think it's very important that you have a kind of a regular information to the board where you are using these regular meetings in two ways. First of all, every meeting should always contain a minimum of learning and to bring them further on the journey to actually understand the point with risk management. The other one is to certainly give them a correct information of what's the risk profile of the companies, what are the really value drivers, what are the risks that actually could change these value drivers for good and bad, what's the operational risk around this, what is the catastrophic event we do see and have calculated. So because I think and my experience is that if the board has the time or given the time to have time with you as a corporate risk manager and what you know and where, and if you are able to actually keep the picture on a level where they do see the big lines and not falling for the falling into details and the nitty and gritty. At least my experience there is that most of the boards really like to learn about this, hear about this. And again, I think that it is very important that you are managing to keep it on a level where they can actually follow you and join you and being a part of your thinking. And that is very often when it comes to strategic risk, which is also some of the most important risk in a company. So I think that touching and starting with a strategic risk, which any board should, love to understand more of, discuss it, put the quantifiable number on to say something about it. I think if you start there and then bring them a little bit and closer to the more tactical risk through risk assessment and risk mapping, showing them what's actually today driving the most important risk in the companies, how are we managing this, what's the opportunities, what's the downside here, and your experience from it. I think they will lend you ear. But again, just reporting a more and less a risk map that is standing still because it's so aggregated that it doesn't move anything. So when a board that's seen the same picture for the last 8 months, they lose their interest and they don't really understand why they have to see it. So you as a risk manager has to make it lively and dynamic and interesting. And again, that depends a little bit of your own experience, what you know from the rest of the world, not just from your own company, but that you have examples and issues and things that happen around in the market to enlighten them and to inform them about it, because then I can tell you the interest is coming very soon, and then also being able to present for them some thoughts, calculated, presented, ideas, issues, things you think could be opportunities, things that could be something we should think closer about. If you can manage to do that, I think you get the ear and their attention. But again, it's very much up to you to do that. And it starts with making sure that you have time for that. And I think one of the more common traps here is that when it's a board meeting, risk management very often is capped when it comes to time. I know that their schedule is busy, but again, then you should have the ability to go to the chairman of the board or to maybe a combined risk and audit committee in the board and say, hi guys, I think this is very important. So 15 minutes will be a little bit short. I need 45 minutes to really make sure that every one of us understand this and take part of the discussion. So it starts with having enough time, because 10 to 15 minutes is way too short to be able to create very much interest. And when they get a little bit more time and you get a little bit more time, and if you use that time very good, you have opened the door, and the more they see, the more they want. And that's my experience. So when we started to come up with understandable, for example, where we were mapping actually strategic risks and the potential downside, how they will fill out in our portfolio, we get so much positive feedback from the board, and where they say, why haven't we got this before? We want more of it. Could you do that? Could you do that? And then, then the executive management certainly has to respond. The risk management has to respond. So it's a way of serving them what they want and what they can also be joining into and understand, and giving them the feeling that they are also someone that can contribute to manage this company.
Thank you, Petter. And you talked there about educating the board in risk management and making things interesting for them and so on. But do you think that there are many boards that don't even know that they have certain responsibilities with regard to a risk management process?
Again, Håkan, that differs. I've been into boards where they definitely are aware of this, and where their attitude and their knowledge and their interest for this is definitely there. And when you have a board like that, so much is done because they know what they want, they know what they're looking after, they have the right questions, they know what to ask for, and so on. And again, I've seen the outer point for both, where you have risk management, never been interested in risk, doesn't know anything about it, never set aside any time for it. I really seen the outer point of both. So, but I do think I have seen definitely a movement, and I also being so happy that I've been joining a team where we are educating new board members in different companies. And I do understand that people coming in new boards definitely has, what I've seen, a better understanding of how much risk means to a company, and that it's actually risk management is so important to understand how good a company really are doing it. So I definitely see a new trend in new board members coming in, that they are aware of it. They don't know, obviously, not all about risk management, what's what in it, because they're not expert in it, but they are willing to learn more. And I do see also things that are very positive, as I see in the Lund University, in Norwegian business schools, where new people taking their master study in finance, where risk management has been some mandatory training, and they get good professors that are educating them in the meaning of it and the importance of it. And I think it's not something you can change over the night, but I think what we are seeing now, it's a movement, and it's a steady growing attention about this. And when the more established universities and high-profile universities are picking it up, making it as a part of their program, I think it's a very important step in the right direction. It takes time, but all things that is quality and good takes a little bit of time. So I definitely see a very interesting movement.
Risk-aware boards of directors is very much good news, Petter. So that is encouraging. But one of the things you've also touched upon, Petter, is the questioning of good results.
Yep.
That the fact is that a lot of risk builds up when things are going well, and you have complacency and people like the results they're seeing. But that this is actually when the board should ask some tough questions, because the results could be the result of taking a lot of risk. What are your thoughts on that role of the board of the directors?
I think that a lot of boards still are a little bit colored of the fact that if you do see a very good result, very few questions is asked. And actually that is definitely a point where you should be as much interested and ask even more questions than if the results are read. And I also been co-judges in several courtrooms where the chairman of the board has been very frank and said that when I asked him, why can't, we had one case I remember where their company's actually main thing to do was to what's in transport, and where the profit were coming from the transport. 90% was coming in by doing the transport. But for a couple or 3 years, actually, it's been actually less than they gain from the currency exposure. And when I asked the chairman why did he never asked about how it could be that they earn more from speculating in currencies than what was their main actually task to actually provide transport in the community. And wasn't that natural to ask that question? He was very frank. He said, no, I mean, it was a blue figure. It was very good. Why should I ask? This was something that we really had, helped us to have a better result. So he never asked about that. And certainly behind that, it was a tremendous exposure, way over what I think the board know about, and where it was given any mandates for. So I think it's very important that the board actually both look at if it's a very good result, how that's harmonized with our strategic risk profile and our tactical risk profile. Is it something we can expect, and could it be, what can change it? It's been a very good year. What do we think about the next year? Would we continue with the same risk profile? Do we see any possibilities for things could change, that we could even earn more or less? And again, from my experience with the big investments bank, this was some of the most important issues around the table, because it was never ever accepted to say anything like business as usual or anything simple like that. You always have to explain why do you believe in this, and you have always to explain what kind of if you think it's business as usual, why do you, or what do you base that on? And then they open up for discussion. Are all the other people around the table agree with this? So I think it is, when it comes to board of director, it's very important that they learn to be very curious, even if the result is very positive. They should really understand where all this money is coming from, as they will be if there is a negative result. So that is something we should take time on and make sure that there is a balance between risk and reward. And if it's not the balance, we should definitely understand why it's not like that. So I can't really underline how much and how important that is for a board, that yes, they should definitely understand if anything is wrong, but they should also understand if even everything points the right way and everything looks positive, why is it like that? Because that will give them a better feeling and better sleep during the night if they understand that as well.
That's a very valuable perspective, Petter, and food for thought, definitely. We move on to another theme, which I know is very dear to you, Petter, the topic of integrated risk management. And you have strived to integrate risk management of many different kinds of risk, looking for what is best for the company as a whole. Yeah. What are the possible gains from taking such an integrated perspective, and what are the challenges one faces in getting there?
Let's start with the challenge. I mean, I've been visited by many big companies around the globe where they have been absolutely seeing the benefit of having an integrating or a holistic risk management process, but where they are fighting with what one enormous company was calling a number of kingdoms around in the company, where they in earlier years have given away the responsibility for everything from finance to currencies to funding. They have given away and decentralized all these things and making, as they call it themselves, small kingdoms. And when you have done that, that's definitely a challenge to make sure that the number of all these kingdoms and the sum of all this actually are pointing the same way. And that leads us over to the benefits of having an integrated and a holistic view of a company's risk management. First of all, if everything is coordinated, it's obviously easier to make sure that you don't do sub-optimized transaction. With sub-optimized transaction, I mean that you are doing transaction you shouldn't have done at all, and you're doing it because you don't see the totality. You may be making a hedge where the hedge is not necessary because it's already hedged by other type of position or by correlations in the company. And again, this can save you for millions, also billions of dollars, if you have a lot of things that is correlated, or where you have a lot of different exposure position that gives a totally different answer if you see them together or if you see them as standalone exposures. So I will say that, first of all, it is a lot of money in there to make sure that you avoid suboptimal transactions if you are capable of seeing the totality. And I don't think any company could manage to have a very tight picture of the totality, but everyone could improve quite a bit. And to make sure that, for example, huge hedging transaction, it be commodities, it be financial, it's coordinated through an enterprise risk management department. So you manage to do what's correct from a tax perspective, that you do what's actually best for the corporate and not for just the business division. But I mean, if we have, as I said, other exposure that netting out these exposure, make sure that you don't do hedging transaction. That's not necessarily. Make sure that you're doing hedging transaction or other transaction that are correct based on the whole picture and not leaving out facts that could be hard to see for another or for a single business division. So there are a lot of money on the table that otherwise will be picked up by brokers, by investment banks, because you are doing number of expensive transactions. And what's so expensive with the transaction? Well, even with our rating, we pay a couple of $100,000 for a swap. That actually is the transaction cost plus the spread cost you always pay. And well, one transaction is not something that really harms you, but when you do thousands of this during a month, it really becomes huge sums that you are leaving on the table to everyone else, and which you don't have to do. And one thing is that you are paying for doing something you don't want or don't need to do. But even worse, because of this transaction, you can also drive the company in the wrong direction of what your actually strategy is, because you don't see actually the course you now are taking, because you're not seeing all the transaction, you are just seeing a few of the transaction. And I've seen example from my own company where we were doing a currency hedge many years ago, and where actually the corporate's position was zero, and we want the zero position because we are not speculating in currency in Equinor. We don't have any reason for doing that. So we try to be neutral. We try to avoid that. But because of these hedging transactions, when everyone comes up to say we want to hedge something, they let the shoulder down. Hedged means to secure something. That must be okay. Go ahead, guys. But what we achieved was actually bringing our zero position to a short position in currencies. So we paid a lot of money for a transaction we don't need, and we paid a lot of money for actually putting our company in an exposure we don't want, and as we have to cover up for later on. That's not the way you do prudent business, actually. So it's a lot of things, but it's obviously the threats here is that it's a bit of work to do it, and I don't expect anyone, and you don't need huge system to do it, but you need someone to pull at least the big lines together to see if we can, if what's correct. And as I mentioned, for example, do you hedge before or after tax? Why should you hedge anything before tax? It's totally nonsense. So just there to being or having a good conversation with the tax department to understand also the accounting rules. It sounds boring, but when you know, for example, that the derivative, according to accounting rules in Norway, is taxed on 28% basis, when the underlying is taxed on the 78% basis. If you don't know that, you can fall in the trap to hedge 1-to-1. But if you have done that without knowing the accounting rules, you will have overhedged. And we have actually history for that in other companies that actually were constructing a hedge that was short selling the whole company because they didn't understood the imbalance between using a derivative and the tax of the underlying. So again, it's a lot of things that you can improve, and you don't have to do everything at the same time, and you should expect that you can do that fix it over the next few days. It's a kind of a process, and you can achieve a lot without having very import or having very complicated and costly systems. You can do a lot with just having a few people knowing the business, knowing the mainstreams, and put these together.
That sounds like a pretty solid business case in favor of integrated risk management, Petter, in actual dollars and euros and Norwegian kroner. So, but the problem here, I guess, is that people look after themselves and identify with their groups and teams more than the company as a whole. How can you get them to step outside of that and look for what is in the company's best interest?
Yeah, we did it maybe in a, I won't say it might be the right way to do it, but when we saw this, because we very early get a question from our CEO at that time, what's in it for me, this risk management? Is it just an improved audit? I mean, simply, what does it mean for me and my bottom line? What's in it, guys? Let me know. And actually, to prove that this was something that was really value creating, we started to scissor out transactions from all types of levels and combine and put them together and see what actually are we doing. That was a work no one had done. So we started in the end to actually show the management themselves that actually here is this transaction, here is this transaction. If we have knew the totality, we wouldn't have done this. And we show them how much we have done that we could actually just forget about if we have known the totality. And when they saw this, and when they saw the very rough estimates of what these things has costed us, they said, Jesus Christ, this is an argumentation for us to go straight away out to our division and say that everyone has to join in to help you guys to make sure that we are coordinated and to do this. So I think that, first of all, what I'm trying to say, Håkon, this was then coming as a very strong and clear signal from the very top of the organization, because they said that this is awful. If their owners should see what we are doing here, that's not good. And honestly, it's not good. This should be changed, and we have to change fast. So we got a very good support from the very top, because we were able to actually identify and show them how expensive this was for our company. And they certainly helped us to drive the respect for going into this or trying to change this in the company. And when we started to do that, we find a lot of business units that definitely have understood this, because, I mean, reduce costs and to make it optimal based on what's best for the corporate was a message I think that everyone picked up and understood, and especially when it was so deeply supported by the executive management. So I think that it's very important that it comes from the top, and it comes from their understanding and their needs of doing it, because otherwise I think you have a long journey and a very tough job to come through with doing it, and probably you will be hooked off a long time before you have reached your targets.
All right, so building up the business case for integrated risk management and convincing the top management team to sort of go for it. That's part of the solution here, I guess. Then, do you think also that an enterprise risk committee could help towards this goal of integrated risk management, in a sense that is it realistic to transfer authority to such a committee from the corporate functions and the business units that traditionally ran things?
I think that's a very good idea, Håkon, and we have tried it out. Actually, we have been a corporate risk committee, and again, it's not the committee itself. I mean, again, it's certainly the competence and the experience of the people you bring into this committee, and that will certainly, again, as I said, things goes in cycles, and in curves. It goes up and it goes down, and obviously the quality of a corporate committee will, as everything else, as an executive management group, as a board, change in quality and ability to do things and to come through with things. But we have had corporate risk committee since 1999 in Equinor, and you have to remember that this is more than discussing a hedge or not a hedge. It's also a group where people feel very comfortable and trusted, and where you can really raise difficult question and educate each other, and to also not just educate each other, but also to get the common understanding of things and to widen out the understanding, for otherwise the things that could be complicated and very much narrow to one or two person in the companies. No one else actually understood it or have seen it. So we are using this committee to bring up questions that certainly concerns the whole corporate and is of an importance economically or ethically or whatever at the corporate level. And we are using it to educating and widening out and broadening the perspective of these people. And they are, without thinking about it, going back to their divisions with a kind of a new culture where they always asked, and I think that was one of my big moment when I was in a business unit meeting, and when I hear the manager said, well guys, I hear what you're saying, but is this the best for just us as our business unit? Or is it something you can say, sign off that this is really also the best for the corporate? And I was so happy, because this was a change in attitude. It was not just what's best for us guys and a very limited and narrow picture, and to bring up your own P&L. But a very true question, is this also something we mean is the best to do for the corporate? Because when you are able to do that, and if you go back and see, well, is it really that? Take another round to see if this is the best for the corporate, or if it's just the best for you to do as a business unit. Then you have gained a lot.
That's a wonderful example, Petter, and it shows that it's not only about techniques and models, it's also about mindsets. I guess that's a good takeaway here. We're going to move on to another topic, Petter. You've said that even a solid world-class risk management program is no guarantee that accidents and losses do not happen. Please explain what you mean by this.
Yeah, I can do that. And again, from time to time we are challenging, because we do see that a management decision or a strategy may be a little bit unbalanced. And what we are doing, we are then certainly trying to at least bring up our views and our calculations and what we mean about this. And again, and as I told you before, we don't decide anything, but it's very important for us as risk managers to make sure that the management and the board has understood what we are up to, and have seen both sides of a strategy, that they have seen the benefit of the strategy, they have seen the weakness with the strategy. And then when we have succeed into bringing up a good perspective, I mean a total perspective, showing both the good thing and the bad thing, and the consequences and the costs with not doing it or with doing it, I think we have done our job. When we are sure that the executive management and the board has understood that, then I think our responsibility in a way is ended. But if we are not allowed, or if they say that, well, we have heard you, but we think you are way too negative, we are thinking that you are way too narrow-minded, or it's much easier to say no, or they think this is very maybe too conservative. They have a lot of words for it, but at least they are not agreeing, and they are just turning our suggestion down. And that's something we have to respect. And we have been through a situation where risk management has pointed out this and said that this is something we should have done different. We should have stress tested it better. We should have done this to understand the perspective, and maybe that will also change our look upon if this is smart or not. But it's been turned down. And well, that means that even with good actually advice from risk management, if the management, which is their duty and their responsibility to take the decision, if they don't want to listen for one or several good reasons, well, that's their decision, and that means that even with good advice and good risk management, the result could be certainly very different. So it's not a guarantee. And again, even with open lines all the way up, I mean, remember again, these people are influenced by a lot of external people. It could be consulting agencies, it could be market trends. I mean, it's very easy to see a management get a little bit more greedy than they should be, because everyone say that this goes to heaven, you have to be on that rally. And then a guy coming up from risk and saying, oh, the chief risk officer is coming that, well, I do see the upside, but it's also a very huge downside here that you should understand, and that you might be going into this with at a very high price that would change the break even for the whole portfolio. But where the culture has already getting a kind of a grip around the whole management. Everyone wants to join the rally. No one will be standing left at the station when this possible price rally goes. It's forces, and it's situation like that where it's been very difficult to be even a good risk manager and to get through, because I understand them. It's very human. Everyone wants to join this, and everyone wants to be a part of it, and everyone is afraid of being getting the headlines. This was the corporate that never understood that this was a golden moment. I mean, everyone wants to do it. So it's easy to understand the human perspective and the human way of thinking. But in these things, it's very hard to be actually a risk manager. That may sounds a little bit conservative, a little bit retroactive in our way to approach it and so on. And maybe, as we have heard so many times, it's much easier to know and that this is difficult, that it could go wrong, than to be joining that train of opportunities. So, and in these situations, it's not a guarantee having a good risk management, Håkan, I can tell you.
No, I see, Petter. There are some pretty strong psychological forces there that make it hard for a risk manager to lean against the wind, so to speak. But also another thing is I've noticed is that people often look at things from an ex-post vantage point, and this is a recurring problem because people judge risk management actions and decisions after the fact.
Yeah.
At the ex-post outcome, rather than looking at what was the basis of the decision. So you can have an exemplary due diligence for a decision, and it's a calculated risk. Perfect example of solid risk management. But let's say the hedging strategy ends up, losing some money.
Mm-hmm.
And people are upset about that. Do you think there's a way to avoid this kind of problem?
Yeah, I think that it should be mandatory. That I mean, whatever it is, and however we're looking at it, but however the culture and everyone else are actually pumping up something, I think that it should be kind of a mandatory. We have tried, we haven't actually come the whole way through, but we have tried to make a kind of a mandatory risk description that should always be in these things, where we have actually calculated and said actually and done whatever exactly what you said, Håkan, where we have outlined, here is the whole picture, here is the cost, here is the opportunities, here is what we can do, here is, for example, the whole strategic portfolio and the break even for that portfolio, and what the price has to be if we are joining it, if we are shifting the strategy up to this, if we are doing this. So we have tried to build up some reference points that always should be there, and they were there at this time. We had or we've seen a little bit of this culture where greed was taking overhand. But so even with this documented and pointed out quite well, I mean, it's even then when still people still have the belief and their culture and everything says to them that it's the right thing to do right now. I don't know really what to do. I mean, because again, we don't decide, so it's really hard. And I can tell you, we really have in a couple of examples really outlined very thoroughly what is the broad picture and what can go very good, what could go very wrong, what is there anything between these two things? Could we do anything financially or otherwise tuning this risk profile? But again, what more can you do when you have done that? And I don't have any recipe for actually coping with that, actually.
No, the recipe will elude us, I guess, for some time yet. But you pointed to some things there that you have a solid documentation in place of what went into that decision, and you get as many people to sign off on it as you can, so that the board is in on it, the management is in on it, and this should be clear to everyone. So I mean, at least you're doing those things right if you can manage them, but as your point, it's always going to be challenging.
Yeah, and in the end, as I said before, it's in the end the executive management and the board who actually their duty, their responsibility to take the decision. As long as we have, as good we can, informed them and outlined the full picture, I think our responsibility has been fulfilled.
All right, thank you, Petter, for that answer. And final theme for today then. I know that you believe the benefits of integrated risk management extend to non-profit organizations. Could you please share with us your experiences and lessons learned from engaging with the Norwegian Skiing Association, the police department, and others?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is actually a very interesting area where it could be very much achieved of changing the way we are approaching these things, if we are approaching it at all in very many of these institutions. And as you were referring to, we have been, our CEO has been very open and very ready for letting us helping other institutions that ask for our help. And we have been involved in the police, in a health organization. The last was the ski athletes organization in Norway, where we have done and implemented a full risk management enterprise system for them and helping them. And you know, again, all these organizations, they have a mission. They have at least a strategic plan. Why they are there is because someone wants to get something out of it. The police has a mission. And to mention, for example, some of the work we pointed out, and I think we also made a change that was from the police, where we change actually where we ask them what is your value creation? What should you deliver to the society? What is the really upside of having you guys? And how do you actually measure your performance? And some of the things here was, for example, the performance. They measured performance in how many people they were actually taking in selling drugs, for example, on the corner. And that was very good that you were picking them out of the street. And that's certainly important and good thing. But when we said, okay, what about the huge cartels, the huge people and organization that's behind these people that are really feeding these people with drugs? And just, I mean, what you are picking up on the street there are, I guess it's the last part of the value chain here. But what do you do with the really important people behind this, and that's really driving the whole market with these things? Well, that was a little bit more tricky because it was so much resources you have to actually put on these things, and you know you're not scoring very well on the performance if you're asking for a lot more people. And when the bosses ask you what have you achieved, and you have used 1 year, 2 year, and you can just tell them that, well, we are going forward and we are coming closer, but we haven't crushed that cartel still. then very often you are not very popular and resources is pulled back, because it's much better to say that we have arrested over 20 people this week, and that's a huge step in the right direction. So again, what I'm trying to say, with a little bit skewed performance measurement, you can get the whole police force to work against things that could be totally different if you have had the right perspective, if you have the risk management perspective, looking at the overall and risk that matters. That means trying to do something with the things that really created these things, that was behind these poor people that was dealing some small amounts of drugs on the corner. What's the backman of this? Where are the cartels? What can we do to crush these? Because that will, from a social economy, being much more valuable to put our resources into. So that's one example how you can, and so they started also, we gave them our, one of the former version of our enterprise risk management to actually go through and to be very open what kind of things and how can we attack our duty and our mission, and not least spending a little bit time to define what are their mission, what are their value creation, why are they here for. Exactly as the same we did with the health organization. We asked 150 bureaucrats, why are you here? What are your mission? What should you deliver? What's the upside with it? What's the downside? And I must say, first meeting when no one was able to answer, I said, well, that makes this conference very short, because then we can leave the room and last guy out can turn the light out. Because I mean, no one has asked me or answered me why you are here, and why should you be here if no one asks, no one knows why you're here. I think you have to define what are you here, what kind of value for the society are you here to create. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. You have to put the word on that, and when you have put the word on that, you can start to find out what can change that. What can change this from being something modest to something very, very good for the society, or very, very bad. What kind of risk could actually, is it competence? Is it money? Is it laws or rules? I mean, again, it's a lot of risk that could actually change a health society into something quite bad. Because of that, they are not doing the right moves, because they are not seeing the totality so clear, and they're not seeing what they should deliver to the society. And the same with the risk management in the athletes, or the ski athletes of Norway, where we were pointing out things that both were financially, which they have not been paying so much attention to, where we're putting up reputation effects, where we put up risk concerning, we are doing a lot of research. We are doing improvements on everything from how you can build the best jumpsuits, how you could actually, if you have sore throats after a tough ski race, how could you repair that, how you should train. It's medical research, it's training research and things like that. How can we prove, how could we make sure that we are doing the right thing and not putting our athletes at risk? How could we make sure that we are doing things that is also accepted by international and Norwegian law? A lot of things that we came up with, and which is now taken care of and looked upon. And certainly also, how could we improve these things? How could we make things or get a better result with less risk? So they have really pressed it to their chest. And actually, it was quite amusing that just a few weeks ago, the guy who is heading the risk management for Norwegian ski athletes, he was giving a presentation for international internal auditors of how they were managing now risk in Norske Skiforbund.
Petter, it's absolutely fascinating that the risk management framework can also be applied for great benefit in these organizations. It's very encouraging to hear, and the Norwegian sports team is collecting lots of gold medals, so I guess you must have been doing something right there, Petter. And maybe you should think twice before sharing your secrets with a Swede.
Yeah, no, I mean, it will always be, but again, I think again, I think it's fun because the attention of this and the initiative from this was actually coming from the ski athletes. They have seen that they have been involved in a lot of things that actually raised the question about, had they really understood this? Had they understood this as a risk? Had they seen it? Had they been paying attention to it as they should have? So I think that was very, I like that they were coming from their world with their problems and do see that maybe risk management could be something that could improve and could learn something from. And that's, I think, when more organization comes to that and starts to look upon these things, I think that risk management has an enormous potential, and not at least as I see it in the public sector, where you have a very lack of seeing the total picture, where you have different budgets, where something that gaining the whole society is not done or not coming true because someone is sitting as a king over another budget, and that budget is just negative without seeing that that cost in that separate budget actually save the society for huge sums as a total. When you don't see that, you certainly don't pay attention to it. So again, enterprise risk management, holistic risk management in the public sector has an enormous potential if we let the right people actually come up and look upon it and help them to bring it through.
Yes, I suppose not seeing that totality is a problem in all kinds of organizations, and the risk management framework here brings a new way of looking, and we ask new kinds of questions that make people look at things in a new way, and that's always going to be very valuable. And
I think so.
So again, very encouraging. And Petter, it's been a pleasure and very enlightening to hear you talk about risk management. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. Are you going to be going up the mountains today?
Yeah, I guess so. At least a quick trip. The weather is not, it could be worse, it could be better. So a quick trip in the mountain to refresh the brain and get a little bit fresh air. That's needed, Håkan.
Yeah, sounds lovely. It's very beautiful up there, and I hope to be able to join you as soon as the borders open up.
Sure.
Thank you, Petter, and have a good day.
Same to you, Håkan. Bye for now.
Bye for now.